Thank you for joining us for Working Through the Word, a ministry of the Richmond Church of Christ.
Well, good morning. It is good to be with you this morning. If you have a Bible or a device, I invite you to open up to the 52nd Psalm. We'll look at Psalm 52 and Psalm 53. I know many of you. I've went to camp with some of you. I went to Lad to Leaders with some of you, but I don't know all of you. And if I haven't met you yet, please come say hello. My name's Keaton, and I have the privilege of preaching at the Church of Christ at Gold Hill Road right outside of Charlotte. But this is home, and every time we get to come back and visit and be home is a joy. And when we get to come and worship, in addition, it's even better. And so I'm excited to be with you this morning. If you take notes, and I hope that you do, I'm going to give you a little bit of context about this title graphic. So at Gold Hill Road for the month of December, I think similar to what you've been doing here, we've been spending time focusing on Jesus. And there's a lot of ways that you could attack that plan, but we decided to go in the book of Hebrews. We don't know who wrote Hebrews, but the author gave us a really interesting proposition, and it's a simple one that really has lots of layers to it, and it's simple. Jesus is better. If you go through Hebrews, and if you've never read all the way through it, my encouragement to you is do that. Start in the very beginning and work your way through, because the author really has one aim for you, which is to come to the definite conclusion, without a shadow of a doubt, that whatever you put up against Jesus, to the first century audience, he said, whether it be the old law, Jesus is better. Whether it be the patriarchs, would have been shocking for them to hear, Jesus is still better. Whether it be the angels, Jesus is better. And we've looked through this, and we looked that Jesus is the better revelation. We looked that Jesus is the better king. Last week, we looked at Jesus is the better hope, starting with his life and his ministry. And when Mike and I got to talking and figured out what you were doing here, this seemed like the logical wrap-up of this. Jesus is the better victory. That the cross matters. That Jesus' life matters. Everything in Jesus' life was leading up to this. And I appreciate the Bible class this morning. If you weren't here for this, please go find that online, because this, in many ways, will run in tandem with that. But everything that Jesus did, his life, everything in the Old Testament was pointing forward to the cross. If you look in Genesis chapter 3, it points us ahead to the wounded victor that one day will be hurt, but will overcome. Right, what was just read for us and what we'll look in a moment is Psalm 22, a forsaken but triumphant king. Psalm 53, the suffering servant. Isaiah 53 talks of the servant that is to come. And all of these prophecies, if you've never thought of it this way, converge at Jesus' crucifixion. And we're going to look at what happens there, because he could have went to the cross, been crucified, and been a name in the history books. But it didn't end there. He wasn't just one of the thousands of men that were going to be crucified by the Roman Empire, because 3 days later, he does something that no one else could do, and he conquers death, and he comes and he rises again. Jesus' life leads us to this. Isaiah 53, and I'd like to read just a quick excerpt from this. Again, we've looked all around this morning in our class. Appreciate Austin's thoughts leading us through the Lord's Supper. Isaiah 53 is pointing ahead in probably a section of Scripture you're familiar with. But I'd like to read Isaiah 53 starting in verse 7. And I want you to listen. Again, this is 800 years before Jesus is ever going to be born, go up on the tree, and be crucified. But they were already preparing the way for the Messiah is coming. A man is coming. God is going to come and save his people. That's probably the great irony of Jesus' time, is that the very people that should have been the most aware, the most alert to find him, are the ones that missed it and put him up on the tree. But listen to, again, hundreds of years before Jesus is even going to be born, Isaiah 53, starting in verse 7, he was oppressed, he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth, like a lamb that is led to the slaughter. And like a sheep that's before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. And as for his generation, who was considered, that he was cut off of the land of the living, stricken for the transgressions of my people. And they made his grave with the wicked and with a rich man in his death, although he had done no violence. There was no deceit in his mouth. Yet it was the will of the Lord to crush him and to put him to grief. When his soul makes an offering for the guilt, he shall see his offering. He shall prolong his days. The will of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. Out of the anguish of his soul, he shall see and be satisfied. By his knowledge shall the righteous one, my servant, make many to the accounted righteousness, and he shall bear their iniquities. I want you to remember that. We're going to come back to it. Therefore, I will divide him a portion with the many, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he poured out his soul to death and was numbered with the transgressors. Yet he bore the sin of many and made intercession for the transgressors. Jesus is better. Jesus is the better victory, and this was talked about hundreds of years before he came. And so here's going to be our aim this morning. We're heading into a new year. You've been focusing on Jesus this month. I want to offer you three things, three truths that to the Christian should change the way you live life, the way you see the world, the way you go to work tomorrow, all coming and stemming back from the cross. Three things. Number one, Jesus' death is the better sacrifice. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 9. We're going to flip around the book of Hebrews because, again, the whole book is really aimed at this premise, and it shifts in and out of looking at different things, kind of putting them up against Jesus and saying, have you considered this? And chapter 9 is going to go as far to look at and say, he is the better sacrifice, a system that they were intimately familiar with. And he's going to come, the author of Hebrews is going to say, Jesus is not only going to come and make a sacrifice, he is going to come and make the sacrifice that is going to change everything. Hebrews 9, starting in verse 11, but when Christ appeared as a high priest of the good things that have come, then though the greater and the more perfect tent, not made with hands, that is not of creation, he entered once for all into the holy places, not by the means of blood of goats and calves, but by the means of his own blood, thus securing an eternal redemption. For if the blood of bulls and goats and the sprinkling of defiled persons with the ashes of a heifer sanctify for the purification of the flesh, how much more will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to God, purify our conscience from dead works to serve the living God? Jesus came and was the better sacrifice. Every Old Testament offering, in some way or another, anticipated the one true offering, the perfect offering. Because if you go back and you look through, and I know you've studied this already, you've looked at the system within the Levitical law that in essence was a placeholder. It carried things over, but they even understood that what they were offering wasn't perfect. It couldn't finally deal with the problem that every person ever has had, which is, how do I deal with sin? How do I bridge the gap between me and the one who created me? The blood and bulls and goats, this was the law that God gave, came and did a portion of that. But they understood that it couldn't do that fully, and Jesus is going to come to offer himself as the true high priest. Hebrews 9, again, he entered the greater and the more perfect tent, a piece of imagery that might be somewhat lost on us, but would have hit the first century audience like a Mack truck. Right, they're going to be familiar with this process of the priest going and making provision for them for sin and offering these offerings. And the writer of Hebrews says, that's all well and good, but Jesus is going to come and do it even better and do it final, so that this is not going to continue to have to happen. The cross that Jesus came to be on was not an accident. It wasn't a byproduct or an afterthought. The cross, in so many ways, is a priestly act. That Jesus, as the true high priest, is going to come and enter into that tent, so to speak. And when the priests The earthly priests would have entered into that same place and offered the blood of bulls and goats, the best that they had. Jesus is going to come and say, let me do you one better. Let me die. God in the flesh. It's all that God incarnate means, is God walking among us. Let me go be that offering so that this is once paid for all. His blood accomplishes what animal sacrifice never could. They even understood this to a point. Right? It purifies the conscience, it removes guilt, and it cleanses the deepest sin that you and I might have. The author of Hebrews wants us to understand this emphatically. Jesus is the better sacrifice. Number two, Jesus' death defeated our greatest enemy. The one thing, and we'll look in Hebrews chapter 2 if you want to turn over there, the one thing that Satan holds over you and I is death. And if you look back through antiquity, people since the beginning of time have been afraid of what death means. There's a finality to it that we can empathize with. We understand where some of that fear comes from. We can't, in a sense, know what is going to physically happen at the very end. But as a Christian, you and I should take confidence. And the writer of Hebrews is kind of laying this at our feet and saying, don't be afraid. And let me tell you why not to be afraid, because Jesus has already come and taken away the fear and the power and anything that a Christian should be worried about. Jesus is addressed because Jesus is better. And he's better than even death. Hebrews 2, 14 and 15. Since therefore the children share in flesh and blood, he himself likewise partook of the same things, that through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is the devil, and deliver all of those who through fear of death were subject to lifelong slavery. Friends, Jesus is better because he defeats the greatest enemy. He defeats Satan. And again, we could spend the next month focusing on just that concept, but as a Christian, this should change the way you live life. Because you and I, if you and I have put on Christ in baptism, we are living life from a position of victory. God doesn't need our help to try to win. I think a lot of times we imagine God and Satan in this eternal tug of war, and that you and I as Christians, God needs our help to kind of pull the tug of war back on his side. But friends, take that burden away. God doesn't need our help. He's already won. Jesus did it on the cross and said, Satan, you're done. You're living on borrowed time because I have come from the inside out and taken away the one thing that you've had over mankind, which is death. He disarmed the power that Satan had. Again, Satan's weapon is death, and Christ takes that weapon out of his hands by entering death. Please don't misunderstand, and I so appreciate looking through the text in depth that Jesus' death, this was not some kind of trick. This was not some kind of show. This was not smoke and mirrors. Jesus, the Son of God, in a Trinitarian understanding, God himself died. And it's important for us to understand that he died. It wasn't that he went to sleep. It's not that he was in a trance. It's not that he was in a coma. It's not that anything else, any other plausible explanation. Because the author of Hebrews says, not only did he die, he had to die to come and defeat death. It's why he is the great offering, the perfect offering, because he's come and endured everything that you and I have. Jesus wouldn't be the perfect offering if he didn't go up on the cross ever facing temptation, facing the things that you and I face. He did. And he didn't succumb. And so when he went up on the cross as the perfect blood offering, he is perfect, not by default, not because he was never tempted, but because he is the Son of God that remained holy, that remained righteous when given the choice to not be. In the same way, he endured death. But because he is the one true Son of God, he came back. He liberates those that fear death, which leads us to number 3. And perhaps the one that I want you to focus in on the most. If you're a Christian, this should change your worldview. This should change the way you go out into the workplace. This should change the way you go to school. This should influence your marriage. This should influence the way you love your kids. Because Jesus' resurrection is the better hope. That you and I aren't left to our own devices. You and I aren't left to fend for ourselves. Let's read Hebrews 13 and verse 20. Because it reminds us of this. Now may the God of peace, who brought again from the dead our Lord Jesus, the great shepherd of the sheep by the blood of the eternal covenant. That is to say that he has came and paid a price for you and me. He paid a price that we could not pay so that we can spend an eternity with him that we did not earn. Jesus is the better hope. The resurrection validates his identity. I wish we had more time and we would spend a lot of time diving into one of the great purposes of the ministry and the life of Christ was to prove who he was. He came and he made a bold claim. I am the Son of God. I am, and from the beginning I was. Again, a claim that they had never heard before and that even those that wanted to believe struggled with. But the resurrection validates that identity. If Jesus had stayed dead, if Jesus had went up on the cross, if Jesus had endured everything that he did, but then stayed dead, he would be a name in history. He would be remembered as a good teacher. But that would be it. You and I would be lost. But he didn't. Because he's more than that. He is the better hope. He is the best hope. Because he came and he died and then he rose again. Hundreds of years before this time, we were told that he would be, that he would come and he would rise on the third day. It proved, without a fraction of a doubt, he is Lord. He is Messiah. He is the Son of God. The resurrection, in many ways, begins, it inaugurates a new life. It's not just a future promise. If you think of the cross as just something either in the past tense or in the future tense, you're missing one of the great blessings of it. Because Jesus came and died so that very much in a present way, you and I have hope for tomorrow. The same Spirit that raised Christ, the same Spirit that inspired the writing of the New Testament, the same Spirit that helped grow the church as we look through the book of Acts, is still very much alive and well and works with us today. And that should give you and I hope. That should give us confidence. That should change the way we go out into the world because you and I have a message to deliver. Jesus is the better hope. The resurrection anchors our future. I read it this way: our hope is not wishful thinking. I know many times we may think of it that way, but it's not. It's not wishful thinking. It is a historical reality. It happened. Jesus came in the flesh, was born to a virgin, lived a life, grew in stature and favor with God and with man. Jesus is not a fable. Jesus is not a metaphorical teacher that teaches us right and wrong. Jesus was a man that came and lived a life exactly as you and I do. And then he went up on a cross and he endured torture on your behalf and on mine. And then most incredibly, he went into the tomb and on the third day he came out of it. The resurrection of Jesus anchors our future. So what does that mean? You may say, Keaton, that's all well and good. I'm buying in. I believe you. But how should that change anything for me? I want to offer you three things. Again, if you think of the resurrection purely in the past tense, you're missing at least 2/3 of it. If you think of it only in the past tense and in the future tense, you're missing 1/3 of it. The resurrection changes not only your past, but your present and the future to come. You can face the past because it's already been forgiven. Wherever you may come from, wherever you may begin a journey, wherever you may consider Christianity, you can come in it with the guarantee that if we put our faith in Jesus and go into the waters of baptism, that past is gone. In the text, it literally says that when you and I come up out of the waters of baptism, we start over. We become a new creature. At the molecular level, we start over brand new because Jesus has given us a new name and a new life and a new purpose. But maybe you're struggling with the present. You can face today because he lives and he reigns. He presently reigns. In spite of the fact that you may look out into the world, you may see all the things going on around you, and you may be anxious, you may be fearful, and I don't blame you. But recognize that Jesus is not asleep. He's not turned a blind eye to what is going on. He's reigning now. He died, he rose again, ascended to the Father, and we anxiously await his return, which points us to, it should give us hope for the future. You can face tomorrow because he will raise you up. That there is a plan for your life. If you're a Christian, then not only is your past dealt with, your present is already given a path to follow, but whenever tomorrow may come, there's a plan there too. Because I'll go back to what the author of Hebrews, whoever that may have been, wanted you and I to remember one thing, and that's Jesus is better. In a world that is terrified by death, terrified by what may come tomorrow, terrified about what's outside our window, that feels crushed by guilt, the cross, and the empty tomb, proclaim one thing: Jesus is the better victory. Trust him. Follow him. Worship him. Find life in him. Jesus came so that you and I can have that freedom. He came to give us that gift because the reality is that Jesus is the better victory because he conquers the enemies that you and I can't defeat. But he also came to give us the reward that we can't earn. And he came and did that because he loves us. Jesus is better. When you enter in, we begin to think about the new year. We think about what's coming next. We think about what may be happening at work, what may be happening at school. My challenge for you, and again, I love that we've placed emphasis on Christ. Again, we did that at Gold Hill Road. I believe you've done that here for this month. But my challenge for you is it going to extend into January? Is it going to extend into 2026 at all? Because Jesus reigns and is better 365 days a year. When you go to work on Monday, when you go to school, whenever break is over, when you go into hobbies, when you go into your neighborhoods and you interact with people, there are lost people that don't know this truth. That we may be entering into a new year, things may be turning over, but this truth will remain. Jesus is better. And not only is he better, he's the better revelation, he's the better king, he's the better hope, he's the better victory, and he offers it to you freely. But you and I have to respond. This morning, are you a Christian? Jesus is better, will remain better. He is the great victory. And the beauty is that he came as God, as deity and mankind in one package. And he goes up to the cross and he dies a death that we don't have to endure so that you and I can have a seat at the table. We didn't earn it. We certainly don't deserve it. But Jesus says, come, you sit with me. The prodigal son, the father is waiting for the son to come home. Not because of anything that the son did right, but because of who he belonged to. The father looked at the son and said, I want you home because you're mine. Jesus looks at us the same way. Maybe you're the son at this moment and thinking, how can I be brought back home? How would the Father want me back? But he does. He sent us Jesus because he loves us so much that he wants us to spend eternity with him. This morning, if you aren't a Christian, what are you waiting for? Because Jesus is better. If you have any gospel need this morning, will you come let us know about it as we stand and as we sing together?
We hope that you enjoyed today's broadcast, brought to you by the Richmond Church of Christ. We are located at 1500 Lancaster Road in Richmond, Kentucky. We meet at 9 a.m. each Sunday morning for Bible class, followed by our morning worship service held at 10 a.m. Our Sunday evening service is held at 6 p.m. Our midweek Bible study is held on Wednesday at 7 p.m. We have Bible classes available for all ages on Sunday mornings and Wednesday evenings. If you are in the area, we would love to have you as our honored guest. If you're looking for a home church, we would love to make you part of our family here in Richmond. We hope this has been a blessing to you and pray that you have been strengthened and encouraged. Have a blessed day.